Peregrine. So it has been a long time. It has been way longer than I anticipated since I last uploaded, and that's because a lot has been changing in my life in the last few months. So the big news is that I'm no longer living in Paris. I'm now living in London. I've been here for about 3 months. As you can see, I still have some boxes around. I'm not fully settled, but starting to day by day. So in this video, I want to talk about why I moved away from Paris, who I am now in London, and how it's going so far. So in the meantime, don't forget to like, subscribe to hear more from me about my apparently never-ending moves all over the world and how I study different languages. And of course, let me know in the comments if you have any questions or if you want to share about your own story. So the number one reason why I moved is career. So I was living in France. I'd been back in France for about almost 4 years, or 3 years at the time. I was in a job that I was perfectly happy with. But at some point I was invited by another company to interview for basically my dream job. So even though I wasn't planning to look for another job for another year or two, I was like, okay, if I say no to this opportunity now, it might not be there for me in a year or two when I'm ready. So I decided to go through the interviews, and I had nothing to lose since I already had a job I was happy with. And after about 4 or 5 rounds, I actually got the job. So I decided to make the move. So even though it was a bit hard to leave my other job behind, I was really excited about this one, and I really knew that this is where I want my career to go anyways within the next few years. So even though it didn't match whatever vague approximate timeline I had, like this was the time to seize this opportunity and go for it. So I had a 3-month notice period, which is quite common in France. It can be a bit long, but it's a good amount of time to, have time to let everyone know that you're leaving, to do any kind of knowledge transfer. And then after that, I left myself about a month between jobs. It was still not that restful because I managed to get COVID. I was living out of a suitcase. It was a bit hectic regardless, but now I'm finally a bit settled. I definitely recommend getting a break between jobs if you can. This was the longest break I've ever taken, actually. I've often just rolled from one job to the next, from one job to my master's, and it was nice to get a breather, even though it was still a bit stressful. So the second reason why I left Paris is because it was kind of a temporary stop for me anyways. So when I moved to Paris, or moved back, I should say, I didn't really know how long I would stay, but I knew that it was important for me to live there at some point. So you may know that I'm actually from Paris. That's where I was born. I grew up there until about teenage years when my whole family moved to the US. I was there for quite a while, and during that time, even though I would come back to France often, I had a lot of French and French-speaking friends. I even worked for a couple of French companies, but I was still not living in France, in Paris itself. And that's something that I started to miss. I really wanted to have that experience as an adult, to live there on my own, to work there, and really have that as part of my identity and part of my experience. So it was really important for me to make that happen. So when I got a job offer in France about 4 years ago, I decided to go for it, and I haven't looked back, and I was really happy with that choice. So I didn't really get to do everything I was planning to do during that time. I mean, my plan was to reconnect with old friends, with family members I didn't know that well, to travel around France itself, because frankly outside of Paris I haven't been to that many places around the country. I was also planning to meet a lot of new people. But between COVID, the fact that I was planning to stay a bit longer, so maybe I didn't feel too rushed, and also just that life doesn't go according to plan, I didn't really get to do all those things. But still, I had a really good time, and it really was, I would say, kind of a formative time in my adult years, where I really got to go back to my home country. Although, it's not where my parents are from, it's not where all my family has its roots, but that's where I was born, and that's what I answer. When people ask me where I'm from, I say I'm from France, I'm from Paris, and it was really important for me to go back and spend some time there and really kind of reconnect with that and make new memories that are way more recent. I would always recommend that, whether it's a place where you were born, your parents, or some kind of culture that is drawing you in. I think it's always a good idea to go there and try it out. I met somebody a few weeks ago who was telling me he's half French, but he's never lived there, and he's thinking about going there, but not sure. And I would say, go for it. You can always leave. Of course, it can be difficult financially and so on to just completely uproot your life. But as long as you have a few things in place, it's always worth to get that experience. And I know I'm a definitely much richer person, not financially, but in terms of who I am and what I understand about myself and the kinds of environments where I can adapt. compared to before, even though I had already been all over the place. But after spending these 4-ish years in France, I really have a lot more understanding even about myself than I did before. So definitely don't regret it. So another reason why I decided to leave Paris and I'm now in London is sort of culture fit. So you may have gotten a sense of this already, but I'm always kind of looking for this elusive, non-existent culture that matches me perfectly. So I know that will never happen, but one of the things about growing up in different places, having parents from elsewhere, moving around myself, is that wherever I go, I can usually find things in the culture and the environment that match me well, but at the same time, I'm always a little bit out of sync. And so I'm always curious and a bit eager to try different cultures, and I often get drawn in by different types of lifestyles that I want to try or that seem like they would be interesting for me to live in. And the UK definitely has some of that for me. But some of the things that I wanted to leave behind, or I'm not sad to say goodbye to in French culture, are, well, some of the things I mentioned in my French work culture video. So for instance, the fact that in France things can be so hierarchical, especially in the workplace, can be very, very much a constraint. Especially, once you've lived elsewhere, you know what it's like for things to be really open and kind of fluid in that sense. It can be really restrictive, and that's not really something I enjoyed. It's also something that kind of bleeds over into other parts of society as well. Even though, I was living in Paris, I was working in design, so things can be, much more progressive than elsewhere. But it's still something that I could feel the difference compared to, let's say, New York or London, where I am now. And in terms of what's drawing me to British culture, there are a few different things. So when I was little, like 7 or 8, I used to think it'd be really cool to go to boarding school in the UK, wear a uniform. And this was even before I was reading Harry Potter or anything. In high school, I used to really love like British panel shows and like TV shows like Skins. Well, who didn't, but and my favorite bands were like Franz Ferdinand, the Arctic Monkeys, the Kooks, Kaiser Chiefs, like all those bands. And it just really felt like, okay, I really like jive with this British music, with a sense of humor. This could be like a good fit for me. Then I almost came to London actually to study for my bachelor's, but past that point I really wasn't thinking about the UK that much as a final destination or as like a place where I would ultimately be. One of the things is that British culture feels a little bit like halfway between like Latin European culture and American culture. I know this is not like an exact equation, but it feels like I find a little bit of both sides. So I really like that as well. So it's not so jarring. So all that means that when I had the opportunity to move to London, it wasn't a place that I had never thought about. It wasn't a place that I was worried about. I was actually really excited and thinking like, okay, this is a nice little full circle moment that a place that I used to think about quite a lot is now an option for me, like in this really clear way with a job opportunity and the kind of stability that is kind of hard to find in a new place. So far so good. I've been really enjoying my time in London. So far, I have to say the weather that everyone talks about has been amazing. I don't want to jinx it, but since I came in April, it's been almost all sunny days. I've been riding around my bike, which I brought with me from Paris. I've been discovering all sorts of neighborhoods with, beautiful parks and canals and all sorts of hectic stores and eclectic restaurants. And it's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed my time here so far. And who knows what's going to happen down the line. I don't know if I'll be here in several years. I could even be in the same job in a different city with all the remote working happening. Things can be so flexible. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. For now, I'm just working on feeling more and more at home in London. And even though I feel, of course, a bit sad about leaving Paris, it was a really big deal for me to move back there. It was not only because it was my hometown, but because it was difficult to go back. I went through a lot in terms of bureaucracy, in terms of like being quite lonely initially, and just kind of finding my footing wasn't so easy. I invested a lot in that just emotionally, and it was really, really important for me, and I really enjoyed that time there and I really treasured it. So it was, of course, sad to leave, but I'm also really excited about what's to come. So thanks again for watching. Please like and subscribe if you want to hear more from me and the places I'm going, the languages I'm studying. I know some people have been asking me about my time living in Korea or how I go about studying different languages. So definitely that is coming up. I even have a video that I filmed a long time ago in Paris about finding apartments there. It's coming soon. So yeah, thanks again for watching, and let me know in the comments if you have any questions, if you want to share your own story. And like always, thanks for stopping by. See you next time.